Zohaib, is that how you pronounce your name?
Zohaib. I mean,
Zohaib?
not Habe. Zohaib, yes.
Zohaib, nice to meet you. Appreciate you coming on. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yes, sure. Yes, sure. And if I may know your know your proper name first. I mean, is it Jeff? I assume.
No, Jeff is my scheduler guy. My name is Tom. Tom
Okay, Tom.
TJump.
All right. Nice to meet you again, Tom. So this is Zohaib Shahid, and I'm basically a PhD student at Loughborough University, London. And at the moment, I've just started out my PhD journey in October 2022. I basically belong to Pakistan, and I'm actually on what do you call that? I'm actually on a government scholarship, and my research is in the explainability and fairness of artificial intelligence because we are surrounded by so many systems.
Oh, I think he froze. Hey, chat. How's it going? Freeze ray. Yes. Freeze ray. Our hairs match, though. Hey, yeah, you froze for a bit.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Must have been a network connection problem from my end. Okay, well, so as I was saying that yes, we are surrounded by technological systems which have artificial intelligence built in them. So it's very important that the decisions are explainable, can be understood by a common person, and overall they should be fair. There should be no bias. So yeah, that's what my research is around at the moment. Yes.
So I do have one question I really like to ask, which is when we develop an AGI, do you think it'll be atheist or a theist based on the evidence?
Well, actually, I would say that it would be logical. I mean, because the main thing is you cannot build so. I mean, like you cannot build very, very intelligent systems overall. But overall, I would say that any AI that's built would be totally logical because humans are actually building it. So some sort of a bias from humans would be in that. But so obviously, yeah, it'll actually, if there is a very, very intelligent form out there which will be built, I hope that it's totally logical and it makes decisions based purely on logic. That's how it is. Yes. So yeah, the logic part will actually be there. Yeah, I hope so.
Awesome. What do you think we're going to do for morality? How are we going to give a moral system to AI?
That is the main problem, because the main issue that we are facing at the moment with fairness in artificial intelligence and its decisions is that it's very difficult to quantify fairness. There has to be a context to it. Okay, I'm still starting out in the area of this research. It's very exciting and all, but obviously we have to find a way to quantify these things, and this comes at a cost. This comes at somewhat of a you have to attach a context to it to actually quantify it properly. That's the main thing. So yeah, I mean, let's see. This is still a very exciting area of AI at the moment. So let's see what happens in it. But yeah, about the morality thing, I think that as this sentient thing will actually keep learning, so maybe somewhere along the way it will be able to quantify morality. But that's a very far-reaching thing. Let's see. Okay, someone's asking, is Wave AI? That's a good one.
Because yeah, I think we're at the point where an AI could create fake facial image and voice and make it seem like an AI. That'd be cool.
That's what we call actually deep fakes. I mean, in many ways, the applications of this technology are far reaching. They can be used for good, they can be used for bad. But yeah, I mean, I would say that that is a step into the direction of actually knowing more about it and seeing actually what other surprises it holds. So yeah, let's see what happens along the way.
How far away do you think we are from AGI?
Well, I still think that we are pretty far, because the main thing is if you talk about ChatGPT, it's able to think on logic, you're able to have a conversation with it, but still it needs to quantify everything because, in front of you, it might seem that it's talking on the basis of logic, it's giving logical answers and everything, but at the back end, it's all mathematics. It's basically matrices being multiplied with with each other in order to get you the answers that you need. So obviously, I mean, we are still far away from that point. I mean, you might hear people, many big, many big of those entrepreneurs out there saying that it'll reach something, that it'll be something very, very, I mean, big and so intelligent that might take us over. But you have to remember one thing, that humans are the ones building this thing. So obviously, until it has input from us, it cannot keep working in that way. But yeah, we are very, very far away. I believe that we are very far away from something that would actually take over us. That's how it is.
Gotcha. Well, so one of the main things I talk about on my channel is evidence or reasons to believe in a God. I'm an atheist, of course, so I don't believe that there is a God. Could you tell me what your position is on does God exist, and are there reasons to believe in a God?
Yes, obviously. Basically, I'm not only born Muslim, I'm also a Muslim by choice, obviously. So yes, there does exist a higher power, there does exist a God, and obviously you see him in the nature around you. And well, that's what I take logically from my religious book, the Quran. That's how it is. I mean, everything that you see around you, the earth rotating around the sun, the planets being in symphony, and basically the whole environment, the way the seasons change and everything, there has to be a higher power around it. And obviously that superior power is God in one way, I would say. Yes.
All right, so what about the stars and the seasons indicates that it's a God as opposed to a natural phenomenon?
Well, actually, the main thing is that's what I believe in. That whatever we state as the nature, obviously there's a logic behind it, there's a thing behind it, and that programming, that coding of the whole universe has been done by a superior power out there, and that's what I believe, that a superior entity is in fact actually running all of this. We have been given the free will. We can believe or not believe in something, obviously, but we're open to debate about it, and that is the best thing I like about being humans and all, that we're given a choice to actually either believe or not believe. But obviously it's always good to actually debate about it, know more about it. That's how it is. So obviously everything that you see around you, from the smallest molecule to the largest galaxies, obviously there is some coding in the background going on. Obviously I come from a technical background, so that's why I'm like using that analogy over here. So when you have that programming and that coding in the background, so to obviously make all of these things work, there is obviously a higher power in motion, working on all of this. That's how it is.
Well, what do you see in the programming? Because I don't see the programming of the universe. It seems very random to me. It seems like it's just a mishmash of things. Why would we think it's finely tuned like a program and not just a natural result of things that are just smashing rocks smashing into one another?
Well, actually, know what the main thing is, that there's still sort of, what do you call that? There's still sort of, you might see chaos out there in the universe, but obviously there is sort of a pattern to it. And obviously, I mean, there is a logic to it overall that's making things happen in that way. Like if I see asteroids actually shooting throughout the space at any moment, some of them are hurtling towards Earth at any moment, but obviously they miss out or they don't come into touch. So obviously there is an intervention from a higher being in all of that. So that's how there is to it. It might seem all random, but there's actually a pattern behind it. There's something that you can always find, and that's why we have things like mathematics in place, so we can actually find out that what's the logic behind these things and how it's all happening. But obviously, there is a high power at play over here, making all of that happen. So yes, I mean, if you talk about catastrophes and all, obviously, I mean, like, if you say that nature has its hand in it, obviously, I mean, there's a God, obviously. So I mean, when we say that everything that happens over here has to be good because God has his hand in it, but obviously he always says that humans are also like over there, and they can think for themselves as well. So obviously it's like a test for us as well, just to make sure that we are on the right path as well, and we are making sure. Obviously there are some calamities, natural calamities, that obviously that we can't face, or obviously that we can't foresee, but obviously it's our choice on how to face them, and that is the ultimate test, obviously. So you do see a pattern in the you do see a sort of a pattern in the, what do you call that, in the chaos. That's how it is. That's how I see it. Sorry
Well, do
for.
you think that any pattern requires a god or a designer? Because it seems like it's impossible for there not to be a pattern. I think that if there's a god or no god, you're still going to have a pattern no matter what. And if we had a god, I think the pattern would be very different. So, for example, if there was an all powerful being who designs the universe for life, I would expect life to be everywhere. Whereas we see life in a very, very small piece of the universe, and most of the universe will kill us wherever we go, underwater, in space, too much oxygen, anywhere we go, it's pretty much going to kill us. So it seems like the pattern we see isn't something that was designed for life, because then we would expect a far higher proclivity of life. And so, what is it about patterns? And do you think it's possible to have a pattern without a god?
Well, that's what I would say. Actually, that I would say that, like, on Earth, as we see life on Earth, obviously, leaving out some areas. And in the whole of universe, we don't see life at all in some places. But obviously, there are galaxies, there are parallel universes in existence. I would say that this is like something of a very higher understanding of something of a very, very higher stature that still humans actually need to understand. And that is the point of scientific research, that need to keep going deeper and deeper into the purpose behind these things. I mean, that's how it is. When I actually indulge into any kind of research, actually, I do question the existence behind it. I do question like the logic behind it, and I believe that much of the logic has not been revealed yet, and that's how it is. I mean, but that's the point of scientific research, that we delve deeper into it and we try to find the logic behind all these things. And I agree with your point. Obviously, you would expect to see life everywhere, but in some places there is life, and in some places there isn't. But obviously, that's the whole point of it. We have to actually appreciate the magnanimity of it. I mean, the magnificence of it. I mean, that's how Earth was created, and that's how it has to be. But obviously, you also find life in the most desolate of places. Like, if you are walking somewhere in the Sahara Desert, you do come upon oasis of some sorts. That is something very, very, actually, I would say that something very, very interesting to see, that that there's life right in the middle of a landscape that was not supposed to have life, but you see it right there. So obviously there has to be a high power. There is a high power at play over here. So yeah, that's how I would put it. But that's what scientific research is meant for, Tom, that we are supposed to dive deeper into the um, what do you call that, into the depth of these things, go deeper into it and see how things are and why things are. That's how it is. And we have not been able to scrape the surface much. There's still a lot to it, right? And humans are still on the conquest of it, and that's the purpose of us, isn't it?
Well, so I agree that we haven't come close to learning everything. There's a quote from Thomas Edison: "We only
Yeah,
know 1 millionth of 1% of anything," and I think that's an accurate quote. But I
that's
tend to agree with most scientists when we look at these things like the origin of life, abiogenesis, evolution,
hmm.
the physics in the universe. Not very many of them conclude a god did any of those things. Most of them conclude it's just laws of physics, and so I don't see the connection you're making between these patterns that we see and saying they can't come about naturally and they must come about by a god, because I think all of these things can come about just as a properties of forces of nature. I don't think it needs anything above the forces of nature to explain these patterns. I think that the physics explains the patterns just fine, so why would we need this addition of a god to explain the patterns?
Well, actually, in that case, the theory of evolution, that's a very, very controversial topic, I would say. Many people have different says on it. I'm not against evolution, obviously. Uh, Obviously, I've studied science all my life, and that's why I'm doing a PhD to dive deeper into it. I'm not against evolution, but there are some controversial points in it. But obviously, without additional research, we cannot actually say something about it. But obviously, I mean, these things have a start. They did come from somewhere. I mean, in order to evolve into something, there has to be a force behind that thing to make it to make something, to give something the ability to evolve properly. Obviously, in that case, I would argue that there is a high power at play that will actually enable these things to evolve, because obviously they cannot do it on their own. Yeah, That's what I would say. But obviously, some niches in this topic are very controversial, and obviously they require more research. And then you have philosophy entering at some point. Then you also have science entering in at some point. So obviously, I mean, there is more research to be done in this area to actually see how these things are coming about. But obviously, what I see from it, that if something's evolving, there has to be a starting point, and then it has to keep evolving. Even if you talk about humans in some way, we're also evolving with the changing forces of nature. And that ability to evolve has to come from somewhere. It had to be coded in by someone. Obviously, physics wouldn't exist without some higher entity playing a role somewhere. That's what I would say. And yes, one more thing. When I say that there is some research to be done into it, I say that according to my belief, I say that that blind faith isn't something I'm interested in. Nobody should be. Obviously, once you understand things, then you should go on to actually believe them without much research or without much diving deeper into it. There's no point in having blind faith, and that's what the world is all about at the moment. What I see, that people just have blind faith, but they can't explain it with logic. What I try is that if I have the logic, I would believe in it. But if I can't understand the logic, I would just put in more time to understand it before I can totally believe it. Yes, that's how it is.
Sure. So I agree that there has to be a starting point for evolution and a starting point for physics, but I don't see
Yes.
why that starting point requires a god. It seems like that starting point could be a quantum field. So, like, I think the best explanation of the origin of the universe is a quantum field that exists outside of space time. And I think the best explanation of the origin of life is abiogenesis. And the reason I think both of those are better explanations is because all of the parts of those theories have been confirmed to exist independent of our imagination. So we use novel testable predictions to test the parts of those theories. So, like string theory, I don't really like string theory, but we can use that as an example. It's a combination of two things. It's a combination of vacuum energy states and early universe inflation. And both of those things have been demonstrated to exist. Early universe inflation was demonstrated in observations of the cosmic microwave background radiation, and vacuum energy states were demonstrated in the Casimir effect. And so we don't know if they work together to produce string theory, but we do know that they both exist. They both are real things. And so
Mhm.
that theory, all of the parts of that theory have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination. But if we take the God hypothesis, there's lots of that theory that has parts that haven't been demonstrated to exist, like an all-powerful that hasn't been demonstrated to exist, all-knowing, outside of space and time, all the different properties that you think of in a God, like a mind that exists outside of our universe or isn't the product of a brain. None of those things have any scientific basis, but all of the parts of string theory have a scientific basis. And so if we want to say which one is a better explanation of the universe, it seems like string theory and quantum fields are better than God because they are all of their parts have been demonstrated to exist. Same with abiogenesis. Why did life begin to exist? Well, we can say that the hypothesis that abiogenesis makes predictions about how non-organic life can form into organic life through a process which can be has like a lot 10,000 steps or something, but we can predict certain of those steps using abiogenesis. Like we can predict that RNA can form onto clay, corpuscles that can form around the RNA to build shells, and those shells can then reproduce and have self-reproducing molecules of RNA, and which can then build into DNA. And these things have been confirmed. We've seen RNA form on clay and form corpuscles on clay, and so we can confirm that this prediction was correct. Whereas the God hypothesis doesn't seem to make any correct predictions about things that we don't know yet in the universe or how life and cellular organisms work at that level. But the abiogenesis model does. And so it seems like if we're trying to explain which of these hypotheses is better, it seems the natural one is doing better because they're only made of parts that we've discovered are independent of our imagination, and they make predictions about things we don't know yet and get them right. Whereas the God hypothesis doesn't seem to do either of those things.
I totally get your point. I totally get your point, but there's one thing that I would like to say, that obviously, this ability to understand all of this and see how these things work, how to make those all those predictions, that ability has to come from somewhere. It cannot be something that humans just developed out of nowhere. So obviously, this thing is something that I would say that it has to start from somewhere. It had to be given to us by somebody. And if I look at the Quran, I do see that that I do see the evidence that that these things, all of the natural forces that we see, everything has had a start. It has been created by someone, and obviously that's how actually God gives evidence of his presence at places over there. And still says one thing, that look around you and see and observe what you see and observe, but obviously uh, do not believe just out of nowhere blindly. Just question it, try to understand it, and then come to a conclusion. So I would say even the ability for the humans to understand all of this and be able to predict something, it also has to come from somewhere. Obviously, it doesn't seem that that it just developed out of like nowhere. That's how it is. Even all of the advanced sciences that we see, all of the advanced technology that we have developed, I believe that it all came to be possible because obviously, I mean, evolution is one thing, no doubt. That evolution and that ability to actually do this and predict something and come up with actually more advanced methods has to be given to us by somebody. And it did not just come out of nowhere, I would say. Yes, that's what I believe in at the moment.
Well, why would you say that? Like, because I think there are lots of things that I imagine did evolve, like eyes evolved, lungs evolved, hearts evolved. These came out of a natural process. They weren't like given. There wasn't like a super powerful heart that gave its heartiness to hearts in organisms. And so why wouldn't consciousness and problem solving and rationality not have the ability to be the same, where they were processes that were developed through evolution? Why would it require this extra being that somehow has the property to give us this property, and it can't just be an emergent property of natural processes?
I get that point as well. So obviously, what's happening over here is that evolution did come about. Well, obviously we have an organs that have actually developed and evolved throughout time. Obviously, if we see our skin color, that's also evolved through the ages. I mean, people living in certain areas have a certain skin color and so on. And obviously, I mean, the health conditions that they have also come from that, also come as a fact of actually due to some environmental factors. But obviously, the ability to evolve, the ability to actually evolve and actually come about in that sense, that ability, that that ability, the start of having that ability actually, there has to come from something. The natural forces have to come from somewhere, from a higher entity, and that's what uh, that's what I would say right now. Yeah.
Well, why do the natural forces have to come from a higher entity? Why can't the natural force of, say, a quantum field be the most fundamental thing in that which it's uncreated? It's just the most fundamental thing in reality, and everything else comes from it. Why does it need to be created?
No, actually, the main thing is, okay, right. If it didn't have a starting point, obviously it is going through a process, all right? Obviously, that process also has to be created by someone who has absolute power over everything and be able to go on with the process and actually make it do things in in a certain way. As I said, actually, that there's a pattern in all that chaos, or else you wouldn't be actually watching different bodies, like all of, I mean, it's not only our universe, there are some parallel universe right next to it as well, and that has been actually stated in the holy book of Quran as well. So of Quran as well. So obviously all of those things are working in a sync. All right, they are synchronized, they are properly working at their own schedules and everything. I see God in all of that synchronized form in which our universe is working at the moment. And that's why I see that these processes have also, although they are evolving by logic, and you can say that there are some natural forces at work, but obviously the inner workings had to be decided by someone. And that's how I see, right?
Well,
And
my
that's
question is still why? Why can't the fundamental nature of reality be a mindless force instead of a God? It seems like a mindless force could create a process. A mindless force could create lots of things that could result in our universes and galaxies, no problem. Like if there's just a force that creates matter and energy, then the matter and energy could have these laws, like the laws of physics, gravity, the weak force, the fine structure constant, and these things could form that matter and energy into planets and galaxies and star systems, and those could absolutely come about with life. I don't see why any of that requires a designer. You said a few times that you think that it does, but I don't see why. I don't see what is the reason that these things require a designer and can't just be a quantum field, because quantum field still seems a lot more reasonable to me, because again, it's made of all things that we know exist and have been demonstrated. It makes predictions, and that seems to make it a better hypothesis than to posit something outside of what we can test to explain the data. I don't understand why that you think that it needs a higher being to explain these things, and it can't be explained by a super powerful force of nature like quantum fields.
Well, when you say a super force of nature, obviously, that has to be God, because that is God, because obviously, I mean, once these things are created, the way they progress, the way they process, and they die away, or maybe they are recreated again, all of that has to come from a higher power. All right. Basically, what I believe is that the inner working, the progress and everything, that's been taken care of by by higher power, a super like a when you say superpower, I mean, I would say an all encompassing power was there always to actually make sure that these processes actually happened at a proper pace, they happened regularly. And there was nothing like, if it had been like without any creator, obviously, there would have been chaos. And all of these things would have actually ceased to exist. That's what I believe in.
Well, why do you think that without God there would be chaos? Because it seems like no matter what, there would always be some kind of a pattern. Even in, like, I don't think in order to have perfect chaos would still be a pattern of some kind. And so, why do you think that the pattern without a mind would be chaos and not what we see around us? Why couldn't the pattern that came about from natural processes just be the laws of physics?
I do believe that, but obviously these laws of physics have to have a creator. That's the main thing.
Why?
These laws of physics like didn't. I'm sorry.
Why? Because it seems like the laws of physics could be uncreated. They're not created by anything. They're just eternal, all powerful physics, and they don't need to be created, and they could have a pattern to it. So, but it seems like you're saying that because you see a pattern, that pattern must be explained by a mind. And I don't see the connection of why, if there's a pattern, it must be explained by a mind. Because even if you take, say, a random computer code, the random computer code can generate a pattern on its own using a evolutionary process. So if you have a computer code and it selects for successful running programs and it eliminates the unsuccessful lines, eventually you're going to get a running program that just came about by natural processes. You don't need a mind to explain it, because the process that you used eliminates the bad patterns and selects for the good patterns. And so it could be the case that just nature on its own can explain patterns, and you don't need a god to explain that, because God also has patterns. God has a mind of some kind, and he has a nature of some kind. Do those need to be explained by a different God who gave him those patterns?
Obviously, no, obviously there obviously will be one higher encompassing power always. So what I see over here is, like, for example, if you talk about computer code that's generating all sorts of patterns, or like giving us a pattern or something. Obviously, computer code is, I would say, at the basic, it's nothing more than actually switches just working like on and off, doing that. Okay, there are electricity is passing through that. If you have a look at all the forces of nature, like electric, like like you see water, or you see electric current, or you see, I mean, fire and everything. Obviously, I mean, these things can just not be created out of nowhere. There's no reason to be. So obviously, these things have to come from a higher power, from where we are able to actually produce further and generate further um, higher higher evolved technology and things like that. That's what I mean to say.
Well, so who created God? Why is does God is complex? Why doesn't he need a creator?
These are just the laws of nature, Tom. At the moment, uh, these are uh, these how these laws are made. Obviously, I still haven't understood um, much of the significance of these things. Obviously, I'm still a student at the moment. But obviously, obviously, as I move on, I will keep questioning these things and just try understanding more. Obviously, I'll obviously, when I don't know the answer to something, it's always is good to admit that you don't know the answer to something, other than just trying to give all the explanations and everything. So yeah, that's how it is. I mean, these are very, very deeper questions. These are very philosophical questions, and obviously, from my side, I don't consider myself as being very, very highly qualified to actually answer them yet. But obviously, I'm just on that journey, and hopefully, sometime, someday, I will find them. Let's see.
Oh, sure. So, but my question is more that when you see patterns in nature, you think that they have to be designed by a god. But if you see patterns in God, you don't think they have to be designed. Like God has a mind, which is a pattern. God has thoughts. He has a nature. Those are patterns. He has
Hmm.
intentions. Those are patterns. And so there's just as much patterns in God as there are in nature. But you don't think that the patterns in God have to be created by something external to God, right? You just think he just has the patterns. They're just there. And so why not just say the same thing about the universe? These patterns are just in the universe. They don't need to be created, just like how you think the patterns in God don't need to be created. Why do you say in the case of the universe it needs a creator, but in the case of God it does not need a creator?
Well, I just believe, that when I say that these patterns have to carry an explanation, these patterns have to come out of somewhere. Um, that is just one of the ways. Actually, that's one of the ways I try to find out that okay, why did the creator in the first place create all this? Why has he created all these patterns, all these good things, but obviously these bad things also exist on the side. But I just think that that's how the universe is meant to be at the moment, and I'm still trying to find all these answers, and I still do question all of this thing in my mind sometimes. So yeah, let's see. I mean, there's still a lot to find out, Tom. That's that's how it is. Yeah.
Well, so the way I see it is that you're arguing that there's complexity, there's a pattern, and any kind of complexity requires a designer. But there's complexity in God. God is complex, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't require a designer. And so it seems to be there's a conflicting argument here. Either everything that's complex requires a designer, or there are some cases that are complex that do not require a designer. Like God's mind, I think, would in your worldview does not require a designer. It's just necessary. And so if there are examples of things that are complex that do not need a designer,
Mm-hmm.
why can't the laws of physics be one of those? An example of something that's complex that does not need a designer.
Mm-hmm. Can you please rephrase that question a bit? I'm sorry.
Sure, sure. So when we look at the laws of physics, they're very complex, very, very
No doubt.
designed, right? But God's mind is just as complex. It's just as designed because his
Mm-hmm.
mind is, it takes a lot of patterns to it. He's not random. He has a personality, he has intentions, has goals. His personality is equally as directed by a pattern as the universe is directed by a pattern. But you
Mm-hmm.
don't think God's mind must have been created by something else. So this pattern in God's mind, it doesn't need to be created by an external thing. So you have complexity without a designer. And so the universe could also be an example of this complexity without a designer. And so the
Mm-hmm.
complexity in the universe could be like the complexity in God's mind, and neither one could have been
Mm-hmm.
created.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh, well, actually, that's a very, I mean, difficult question to answer at the moment. I mean, like, if you're asking that where did God come from or how did he come to exist in the first place, I mean, that's still something that, that requires, I don't know, I mean, that might require an eternity to answer. But obviously, I mean, being from a science background, something like that, I don't feel leaving things out unanswered. I tend to follow logic and everything and believing in everything. But obviously, when some things are unanswered, maybe it's better to just keep looking, because at the moment it's very difficult to answer that. If we see all this complexity and all these patterns and everything being created, the good and bad and the evil and good and everything. So, what's with the creator? Who created him? How did he come about? How did he come to be? I mean, who? I mean, like you could easily question who gave him the right to actually be all this. Those are very, very difficult questions to answer right now, Tom. And well, I mean, only time and research can tell how they can be answered, or maybe at some point God might reveal how this all happened. So yeah, I'm just waiting for that time, actually trying to find the answers. Yeah, we can't answer everything right now, not in just one stream. This will take a lot more than that, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. And that's why I would say, why don't we just use that as our answer for the universe? Instead of saying God created the universe, why don't we say we don't know? We don't know what created the universe. It's not. We don't have a solution yet, and we have to wait and look for more answers in the future instead of coming to the conclusion God did it. Because it seems like any answer you give for who created God, because we don't know who created God, we don't have answers to those. I agree. Why can't
Obviously,
we just say that about the universe? Why do we have to say the universe was created? Why can't we just say, well, we don't know. Let's just keep looking.
if you take a look at all the religions that are in place at the moment, I mean, if you take a look at Islam, if you take a look at Hinduism or Christianity or Judaism and everything, obviously, I mean, I totally respect the point of view that if someone follows religion or not, that's totally their personal point of view. But actually, coming from that point and using that as a logic, I have seen I've seen one thing that all of these point to a higher power that exists, and the higher power that actually wrote all those religious texts for human beings to understand. And basically, whatever was written in those religious texts has been proven by science time and time again. So I would actually look in that direction, I would say, right? That obviously, at one point, if we look at the history of the Western empires, science and church used to go hand in hand at one point, but obviously at some point, sometime after the Middle Ages, they just became separate. That doesn't mean that that no a higher power just ceased to exist in that point. The main thing was that the concept of a higher power was being misused, and that came as a bad influence for those who followed a proper religion, I would say. But obviously science has gone on time and time again to describe and actually prove that these things do exist, and how these things came to exist, what was the starting point and everything, that is still being actually researched by a number of like very good scientists out there. So I mean, they're still trying to find out how these things came to be in the first place. Excuse me. Sorry.
No
Uh, the
problem.
room, the room I'm sitting in, actually, it has like sensors for those lights and everything. So that's why I have to actually wave my hands once and once in a while just to make sure that it knows that I'm here. So yeah, these questions are still highly unanswered. But obviously, when you look at all those religious texts, they do seem to make that sense. They all have that single point in them, that there's a higher power that's at play, and that has been proved by science time and time again. Obviously, I do understand, Tom, that there are many difficult questions to answer over here, and many questions do not carry a simple answer. There have to be some points to be connected, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we should leave those questions unanswered. The main thing would be just to keep looking. And obviously, I mean, through your logic and everything, you have made me question some of those things as well. So obviously, I'm not totally ignorant to these facts, and obviously I'll keep looking and maybe try coming up with a better answer or better logic to answer it. Yes.
For sure. So, when you said that science confirms the religious claims or the religious text, that part I'm not very familiar with. Like, I think that the reason that there are
Mm-hmm.
so many religions and that they all argue for a god is because of a part of human nature called a hyperactive agency detection system. It's a type 1
Mm-hmm.
and type 2 errors. If we hear a rustle in the bushes and we think it's just the wind, or we want to be scientific and wait for more evidence, we get eaten by a lion. Whereas if we think it's a lion every time and run away, we'll survive. And so evolution will
Mm-hmm.
select for people who always say, "Oh, there's a rustle in the bushes. It must be a lion," and run away, because it's evolutionarily advantageous, even if it's just the wind. And so, because of this kind of a selection bias for agency detection, we are more likely to see agency in things than it's actually there in nature, which is why when we're kids, we think that there are monsters under the bed, why we're afraid of the dark, why when we hear a creaking or some kind of noise that we don't understand, it must be a mind or a demon or a ghost. So I think that the reason religions all have this kind of agency behind them is for the same reason. It's because we have a hyperactive agency detection system. I don't think it's because there's actually a god there that's directing these religions and the holy books. And when you say that the things in the holy books have been confirmed by science, that part I'm unaware of, because as far as I can tell, most of the things in the religious texts have been proven wrong. or disconfirmed. I can only think of one scientific truth or something close to it in any holy book, which was from Hinduism. In Hinduism, it says the age of the earth is 4.3 billion years old, which is pretty close. The age is actually 4.5. But even giving that number is still off because we're only like halfway through one of the dreams of Brahma. And so it's like 2 billion years off, but at least it was close in general. And so I don't see science confirming the religious text. It seems more likely they're proven wrong. And I'm from a Christian background, so I know mostly about the Christian texts, and most of the things in those books have been proven wrong. Like the global flood, that was disproven by science. Like
Yeah.
that one was wrong.
Mhm.
Uh, the ark was disproven. The Egyptian Moses and the Exodus, that was disproven. That didn't happen. And so all of the things in the Bibles and the religious texts that I know about have been proven wrong, with maybe one exception, which is still kind of not very right. So I don't understand. If science had been confirming the religious text, I think that would be good evidence, but I don't see that being the case.
Okay. Well, actually, in that case, I would like to point your consideration towards the holy book of Islam, that's Quran. So obviously, Quran is the only religious book at the moment that has not been tampered in any way. Um, Thank God for that. So obviously, much of religious texts, even the ones in Christianity, have been tempered in one way or the other. You would agree with that, obviously. You have like different versions of gospel. You have different versions of the Bible, like the Old Testament, the New Testament, and everything like that. I do not know the differences between them. I'm not like knowledgeable about them. But even talking about Quran, as I've gone through it word by word, I have actually read different explanations on it. There's mention of stars in it. There's mention of parallel universes in it. There's mention of sun going around. There's a mention of Earth going around the sun, and the seasons changing and all of that. And obviously, there's an explanation to it. We have changing seasons because the Earth actually revolves around the sun. Okay, so obviously you have like four seasons actually, and that's because the Earth has actually that depends on the exposure of a region to sun at different times of the year. So in that actually I see a verse written over there that have a look around you, have a look at these things happening in nature, and then you will see that there is a creator behind them, and that's how I see that actually science has gone on to actually prove it. Because if we talk about Galileo, he was able to prove through his telescope, his invention, that obviously how the universe came up, how the universe was designed. He was able to see the planets, he was able to see the constellations and everything, and obviously all of those things have been stated in Quran one way or the other. I was also actually like to point your consideration towards something that's called I don't know, the Quran Code. I mean, it's a documentary by this very known Egyptian scholar. I don't remember his name right now, but if you search on Wikipedia for it, the Quran Code is something like a documentary that's available. And if you look at it, some of the scholars have actually taken some proportions out of the Quran. They have tried to study and analyze it, and they have found it to be matching some things in nature in a similar way. Like for example, we know that Quran is an Arabic text, obviously. So, like we know that 80% of the world is actually water at the moment. Estimate, if you like, estimate that way, and 20% is land, and those proportions have been reflected in the Quran as well. So obviously, a religious book is right. So that's how I related that science has been able to prove that these things do exist, one way or the other. That's how it is. It even talks about the process of birth, of how a sperm and an egg come together to form a human being. It's in the Quran, it's right there. So obviously, science has gone to prove that as well. We have the whole subject of biology in front of us. So I see it in that way that actually those things in the Quran have been proven time and time again by science in one way or the other, and still a lot of that surface has not been scraped yet. So I would actually suggest it's a suggestion mainly that if you do have a look at Quran, if you do read the translation and everything, you would find those things as they are over there. So yeah.
So I have studied a bit about the Quran. Like there's one passage I remember that claims that salt water and fresh water never mix, and that we know is false. In fact, there's parts in the ocean where salt and fresh water are literally mixing all the time. It says that the earth was created before the stars. There was the seven heavens, I believe, and in the nearest heaven the stars were placed, and this happened after the sun and the earth were created, which we know that's false. Like, stars existed before the sun and the earth. And so it seems like when I read the Quran and the criticisms of it, it seems like most of the things in it seem to be scientifically inaccurate, and that you
Hmm.
have to try to make the text fit with science. And it doesn't, like, you're not letting the text say what it actually says. You're not looking at the evidence of the text and interpreting it in the clearest way. You're trying to take from your toolkit of apologetics the way to interpret this text to make it fit your ideology, which, I mean, that's, you can do that with anything. It's an ambiguity part of language. But it seems to me that there are many scientific errors in the Quran, like the mixing of, you can't mix salt and fresh water, the origin, the what's it, the dates of creation seem to be wrong, like the earth did not come before the stars. There's many different things about the sun going into the lake that I don't think that that's not accurate. The moon was split in two, that there's no scientific evidence of that. The light from the moon doesn't have any light. There's tons and tons of scientific errors. Like, there's several websites dedicated to listing all of the different scientific errors in the Quran. And so it seems like more that people who are religious believers try to read their text and make it fit the evidence rather than the other way around. And that's why I don't think that science has confirmed the claims of the text. It seems like the other way around, where it's been disproven, but people who are religious try to make them fit anyway by using ambiguity to try and explain away the inconsistencies. And I don't think that that's good evidence, because anybody could do that. You could do that with Harry Potter and try and make it fit the things that don't make sense as we look in the world and try to confirm what's claimed in Harry Potter, like one of the bridges was blown up. Well, maybe the wizards like repaired it afterward or something. Like, you can always make it fit, but it doesn't seem like it's good evidence.
Okay, well, in that case, one thing about the Quran that should be remembered is, okay, I would never claim that I'm an expert on that thing, obviously. I've literally started studying it properly since like a few years ago. I was very interested on finding out, like, okay, we've been reading all this Arabic all our life, but what's the meaning behind it? So I actually went into a bit more research on it and try actually studying it, the meaning behind it. The main thing in Quran that you have to remember is that it's not like a story actually. There are bits and pieces of things everywhere. So what happens is that obviously, some scholar or group of scholars will sit together and they will try to actually match similar pieces of information together and try to make more sense out of it. But obviously that requires a deeper meaning, and there is a lot of room for error, I would say, because obviously, I mean, some people would give it some other meaning. Some people would give it other meaning. Like the kind of text that I follow, the kind of explanation that I follow, it says that all of the miracles that was stated, like the moon being cut in half and everything, all of those things actually, and even the thing about Moses' staff becoming a snake in front of Pharaoh and everything, all of those so-called miracles have a sort of a metaphorical meaning behind them. All right, they were not actually supposed to be literal in any way, but there's a sort of a metaphorical meaning behind them, just to actually explain something, explain a more deeper meaning. So that is the main issue with Quran. That is the main issue that I've seen over here, that as the text is actually spread out over different passages and different surahs, as they call them, they have to be connected together to find actually that sense. And even when I was reading through it, I've just done like one iteration of it, and I've seen like so many places where I remember sort of that, okay, this was stated somewhere before, this was stated somewhere at this point. So it all depends upon the analysis as well. And obviously, I would agree that obviously that some people might have gone on to explain in some other way. But I would say that obviously some of the more universal facts, like I can't say much about the dates, because till now what I've actually seen in the Quran right now, I haven't seen a much existence of actually actual dates in it. But yeah, I've seen a chronological way events are actually described. I mean, the way the prophets came on this earth and everything. But even those are like spread out. So it would take a lot of like energy and sense to actually understand that. But obviously, the text is actually quite clear. It's quite easy to understand, but you have to connect the dots one way or but you have to connect the dots a certain way to understand those things. That's how it is. and I'm still actually working on that at the moment, trying to make more sense of it. But obviously, the very hardcore facts have obviously been proved by science. But obviously, the very in-depth things that you are mentioning at the moment, the dates and everything, um, I would actually have to look a bit deeper to actually see if there are any dates at all. That's what I would say right now. Yeah,
All right, I don't think there are specific dates for like when the Earth was created, but it does say the Earth was created before
in
the
seven
stars,
days.
because and that part I think is out of chronological order. I think that the stars obviously are billions of years older than the Earth is,
I'll have to
because
look a bit. I'll have to look a bit deeper in that because obviously, as I said, that that I can only debate on things that I know at the moment, and I would never ever try to actually make something like propose something that's totally out of order because obviously that would fall on me. That's how it is. So yeah, but I would say one thing. What I've seen is the Quran does have clear text, but also the main thing is also that there's also a main thing about the Arabic that's being used. Obviously, Arabic is a very diverse language. If you have a look at it, it has many dialects, and basically, it all also depends upon the scholar who has been studying the Quran using a certain dialect or something like that. Also, from that, there stems different explanations and different meanings of different things being mentioned over there. So there is a lot of research being done at the moment, and I can only cite the most prominent ones that I've read up to date now. But obviously, I mean, you're right in that sense that people do tend to give it their own meaning. They do tend to bend the truth in some way or the other. But I don't believe in that. That's a very wrong thing to do. If you don't know about something, it's just better to just admit and just say that okay, I'll just go back and have a deeper look at it, then just try to bend it according to your own logic and things like that.
gotcha. We do have a few questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Yes, sure, please go on.
Sabra Kadabra asks, why is the Quran out of order and incomplete?
Oh well, that's a very interesting question. It might be like something like saying like that God maybe wanted a riddle to come about, or maybe just riddling us in different manners. Well, I would say that's just one of the mysteries out there, Sabracadabra and Tom. I would say that okay, if you have a look at the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, obviously, if you have a look at his life in different ways, the kind of things that he was actually going through, so it was like a lot of ups and downs. So, okay, I'm not trying to actually connect a logic over here. I'm just trying to make more sense of it. All right, that maybe, that obviously in that way, the order in which those things were actually, like the way the Quran was revealed onto the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it had that's why it didn't get to have an order or something like that. But obviously, it was made simple for people to understand. All right, all right. Maybe the higher entity just wants us to connect the dots and see, and maybe just analyze it in deeper order. But yeah, it isn't incomplete. I would say it's totally complete. It is the most complete book up to date at the moment. But obviously, being out of order and having to connect dots, that's a deeper mystery that should be looked into, I would say.
Gotcha. Question from on the right. He asks, can you imagine a world without a god?
Well, that's can you possibly imagine a world without a god? Well, actually, actually, I'm a practicing Muslim. I have my own beliefs and everything. Obviously, I would say that existence without God, obviously, not any intervention from Him, would actually lead to much more chaos than we have today at the moment. So I cannot possibly imagine that. But obviously, I would actually look more into like debating and actually seeing like what it could be like. I'm open to these kinds of debates. So yeah, that's what I would say. But obviously, I cannot possibly imagine it, but I'm open to like hearing about it and maybe seeing how things would come about. What kind of predictions would we have? But obviously, we would have like much greater chaos than we have at the moment. Yeah, that's how it is.
Gotcha. Brother Ben wanted to ask about what your PhD is on.
Well, actually, my PhD is on, let me just put it very simply for everyone over here, because it's a very interesting topic. My PhD is mainly around explainability and fairness of AI. As I said before at the start of this stream, that we have that obviously artificial intelligence is slowly creeping into our technologies in one way or the other. You have Chat GPT being talked about so much at the moment. We have the intervention of artificial intelligence in our GPS, in Google Maps, in City Mapper app, and many apps out there. The recommendation systems that we have on Netflix, or even the justice systems that we have at the moment, whether a person should be out on bail or not, even that is decided by AI in some places, but on a very experimental basis. These decisions have to be fair. They shouldn't be affected by any. They shouldn't be affected by any bias. So that's the fairness part. That's what we have to make sure. And then the explainability, that just leave out the scientists, leave out the mathematicians. Even a layman should be able to understand that why did a specific AI system come to this decision at all. Yes. So we are going to actually quantify the relations behind all these things, and it's a very interesting thing to do. Let's see how it all fares. I'm very excited to actually see how it all comes about.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that the
Yes.
black box problem of AI is a really interesting one
Yes, that one.
that
That one,
we
yes.
don't actually know how it came to certain decisions because we don't go through the processes of looking at all its inputs and how it weighs them, and getting the outputs is a very complex thing that we can't really understand.
You sound so well informed on them. We haven't had a chance to talk about this. So basically, what happens is, that artificial intelligence is much like our brain, actually. So it's like a group of neurons connected together. It has very black box nature to it. I would totally agree with you on that thing, and that's what we are actually trying to get into. Like, if an AI model is trying to give us predictions on the price of housing, the price of houses, how it's actually coming to that decision? Like, is it the family size? Is it the square area or things like that? So the black box nature has still to be actually figured out. And I believe that finding out the black box nature, you can also like backtrack and find out how your brain makes certain decisions one way or the other. So yeah, it's pretty interesting in that way, I would say. Yeah.
Do you think you'd be able to apply your program to humans to be able to understand why they made decisions?
Well, no, that's the point of my research. But obviously, a 3 year PhD won't be able to sum it all up. But obviously, I mean, if I'm even able to open like a small area, or maybe just throw more light on a certain area of research, so why not? I mean, if it helps me to understand something better and make things easier for people out there, so why not? I mean, that's why we are doing all these deeper studies and being so isolated from the rest of the world. Yeah, yeah, that's
Uh,
why it
Brother
is.
Ben asks, did Muhammad talk to ants?
Well, I believe that there's no such evidence of that in the Quran, but obviously there is one prophet who was able to converse with animals, and that was Solomon, I believe. I mean, in the Muslim name is Suleiman, but the name actually that one is Solomon. So the, I mean, he has his roots in Judaism, I would believe. So that was a prophet that actually had the ability to converse with animals, and even beings that we cannot see, like jinns and um, those kind of entities. Yes.
You said science confirms the existence of jinns.
Science confirms me. Well, I mean that you should be asking that to someone who actually investigates paranormal activities. Well, I don't know, man. I mean, these things are still yet to be discovered in some way, because whenever you think about any paranormal activity or some sort of supernatural thing, there's always a scientific explanation to back it up. I've seen like so many documentaries on this thing. I've seen so many videos. There's always some scientific explanation to explain, like this could be this could be that. But yeah, I mean, it's still like a very very big issue to. That's a very big issue to speak on. I mean, that's one of the mysteries, Tom, that we have at the moment. So yeah, I've not observed anything like this till now. I'm not saying I'm open to it. I'm not saying that I don't believe in it. But the main thing is, I'm yet to see something of this sort. So well, let's see. I mean, you do hear chronicles, you do hear accounts and everything, and science always has an explanation for all of that. Like even those images that they show, that kind of like images in which they show that that someone has actually seen something pass by, or something like a being actually passing by, a ghostly figure or something. Science claims that maybe it's the way your pupils vibrate in a certain way that you're able to make those shapes like out of nowhere, or maybe it's hyperactive imagination as you were citing it. But this is like a mystery at the moment. I'm not saying I'm open to it, but I would like to actually look deeper into it before I can say anything true or false. I mean, that's what I've answered to anyone who's asked me whether you believe in ghosts or whether you believe in these things.
Gotcha. James Dean asks, if you had to convince an atheist, what is your best argument for Islam that can't be applied to another imaginary God concept that I can come up with right now?
Okay, so this whole concept of an imaginary God, obviously, it did stem from the actual belief that there is a God, obviously. But the main thing is, I mean, you would have to be very, very well informed to actually convince someone to follow in that way. And the main thing is, I believe in actually leading by example. If I had to actually convince someone that okay, you should leave atheism and come to like believing in God and doing all the good deeds and everything, I would try to prove it by example. I would try to prove it by action. But obviously, by the moment I did agree to actually debate on this, I did actually want to speak with you on this. It was more for like to let just to learn like how much I know and how much I need to know. But at the moment, I'm still working on some things, and as you've seen in the conversation today, I've still got to answer many of the deeper questions out there. But obviously, I would lead by example. If I had to convince someone to actually drop atheism and follow Islam, I would actually try to be a good example of a Muslim myself. All right, that if I believe a God is there, I would make sure that all of my deeds are in good order. I would make sure that I don't even think of sinning at all. I mean, if I fear that one entity, and I would try to lead by example to convince someone to drop atheism and follow Islam. But obviously, in some things, I'm still learning. Yeah.
Gotcha. Daniel Cooper asks, what he likes is metaphor and the rest is literal. How is that not cherry picking? I think he's asking, how
Okay.
do you differentiate between the metaphorical parts and the literal parts of the Quran?
Okay, so the main thing is, I mean, as I said, that it has a more of a metaphorical meaning to it. I mean, that's just the way one scholar is actually explaining it. Because obviously, some of the miracles are some things. I would say that they are too good to be true, or maybe too good to be believed in everything. So obviously, I mean, there has to be a different meaning or another context like attached to it. When I say metaphor, I say it in that order, that maybe that something is being explained like an analogy. There has to be a deeper meaning attached to it. All right, so that's what mean when I say metaphor. But obviously, that is one scholar's understanding of it. You would have to read more of these people and more of like trusted scholars to actually know what's actually happening over there. But some of these things, I would say that they would only be revealed in time, that what they actually meant. All right, so yeah, that's my belief.
Gotcha. Kurt Hahnemann asks, is music haram? Thank you for the super chat.
That's such a common one. Well, actually, that's a very subjective thing. I mean, that is so subjective, I would say. Okay, if I look at myself, I wouldn't take it to be something haram. Obviously, I listen to music when I'm working, when I'm cycling and everything. I listen to music. But obviously, I mean, whenever you say that it's haram totally, there comes an element of extremism over here, and obviously Islam is not all about that. You do hear accounts of music, some in the hadiths and all, but this is a very, very subjective question, I would say. How I would actually say it is that okay, if there's music that helps soothe you and helps like relax you in some way, provide some meaning to your life, that is good. But obviously, if music is being used to, I mean, like spread hate or maybe like evil, then I would not support it in that way, obviously. But if music is being used to convey more meaning to some of our social problems, to convey more meaning to our lives and everything, that would be good. But I would say Super Chat 5 AUD that this is a very, very subjective question at the moment. If you ask someone maybe extremist, they might say it's totally haram. But if you ask someone who's a liberal like me, I would say that as long as it's been not being used to spread hate, it's fine. It's totally fine to whatever you hear. Obviously, just try that it's for good. Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's a really tricky question.
Lubo in China asks, why his God hasn't mentioned galaxies in his book? If it would be mentioned there and then discovered by science, would it be proof of his greatness?
Okay. Well, actually, when I said, okay, so, okay, see, when I said that there exists parallel universes, that has been set in the Quran and has also been proven by science as well. So obviously, we have a solar system, but obviously similar to these, there do exist some other systems as well. And obviously, I would actually match it in that way to Quran. Considering galaxies, there is mention of galaxies in the Quran, but how specific it is, I do not know at the moment. But about the parallel universes, there has been mention in Quran in some places. Yes. So yeah, that has been proven. Thank you.
Gotcha. Um, Sam Shrew ask if Islam is true, then what's the need of Mullah's ban on murtadeen apostasy?
Okay, so mainly ask. Okay, so Sam, I would say that okay, Islam has been bent or actually used to justify many evil acts as well. But obviously, that is not the point of any religion to actually spew hate or spread any kind of hate in any way. I would say that the acts and basically, as you said right now, that people actually also bended the logic in Quran to explain many absurd things as well. I would say that it's just your own mind and how you take things. Obviously, I would say that Islam is a very liberal religion. It's a way of life, I would say. And the mullahs that you're talking about are some very extremist people out there who are just using Quran and religious text to actually prove something that's just not there. I'm not in support of these guys, and I would never say that you should support them as well. Obviously, what they are coming from, they are just satisfying their inner hate and their inner uh, thing for all of this. But obviously, I wouldn't support that, and that's the main thing. Islam is a very liberal religion, and even the Quran it states that when you are explaining to someone, when you're actually inviting them to accept Islam, even do not come on them with force or do not force them. Try explaining with logic and then leave it to the other person if they want to believe or not, but don't try to force them in any way. And that's what Islam is about. The people that you're talking about are mainly extremists, and obviously any true or a Muslim of today would not, any sensible Muslim would not relate with them in any way. That's how it is. We are normal people. We travel as well. We like to experiment with food, with travel, and we like to live our lives to the fullest as well. But obviously within within a proper order. So that's how it is. The people you are talking about are extremely extremist, I would say. Not something
Sa-
I would relate with. Yeah.
Gotcha. Sabracadabra asks, is there free will in Islam?
Yes, obviously there is. Obviously there is. I mean, there is like this Arabic word which so humans are actually they are a degree above animals as stated in the Quran as well. So obviously like animals also have free will, but obviously it's limited. Given they have a certain way of doing things, obviously. But we as humans in Arabic there is a word called ashraf al makhluqat. That means that we have been given the free will. We can actually decide how to do our actions, whether good or bad. We do know that all of these actions have consequences, and obviously there is a concept of free will. But if someone is actually telling you the idea that they are enforcing their will on someone and making them do stuff that they are not comfortable with, Islam is very big on consent. I tell you, all right. So that's why actually God portrays it as well, that whatever life you're leading at the moment, you have a choice in it. All right. You do know that if you do good deeds and if you are a good person, then this result will come along. If you are a bad person, this result will come along. Okay. One way or the other, you can see the consequences. So there is free will. So there is free will. It's up to us how we follow it. All right. And that's actually left to humans how they decide on it, and that's what actually differentiates us from other beings in the uh, from other living things on earth, I would say. Yes,
Gotcha.
legally
All
bound.
right, we've been going for about an hour. Really appreciate you coming on. It was a great conversation. Do you want to give anybody any links or references where they can find out more about your work?
About my work right now. Okay, well, actually, I'm still in the starting 4 to 5 months. But if you are interested in learning more about explainability in AI, or basically, I mean, like leave fairness, if you just want to see how like explainability works in AI or how explainability is, there's a book by Christoph Molnar, Explainability in AI by Christoph Molnar. That's a very good book that comes from a very similar perspective and tries to explain how does explainability come in AI in the first place. So if you're into like studying about it, I mean like knowing how explainability works in AI. So this book by Christoph Molnar, Molnar, is a very good point to start from, and I'm reading that book as well. So yeah, it discusses the philosophical and the social sciences perspective of explainability as well. With respect to AI. And yes, feel free to actually have a look at Quran in your free time. And yeah, I'll be open to any questions. I am very thankful to Tom to actually in all this questioning and everything. I respect your thoughts. I respect your beliefs, and you've actually made me look at things in very new ways and all. Okay, so I think this has been a very healthy debate overall, I would say. All right. If there's anything that was very, very over from my side or very like over the top, so please forgive me for that. I still have very limited knowledge. I'm just trying to actually learn more as I go along. That's how it is.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. It was great having you on, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Same to you, Tom. Okay. Have a good one. And yeah, I'll see you around.